You are stranded. Not metaphorically, not for a show segment. Actually stranded. On an island in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, surrounded by nothing but salt water and jungle, with no way home until you build something that can carry 5 people across open ocean. You didn't study engineering. You didn't study sailing. You didn't study survival. You're a YouTuber, and that's the only way off. The idea sounds insane when it first lands. What if we were actually stranded? What if we had to actually build the boat? Every young man wonders it at some point. What would happen if everything was stripped away and survival was the only goal? Not the version of survival you see on television, where a medic is always 12 minutes away and the real danger is boredom. The actual version, where the outcome is genuinely unknown, where the ocean doesn't care about your subscriber count and the jungle didn't agree to your filming schedule. You stop wondering. You go find out. That's the moment. Not the landing, not the first cut of bamboo, not the float test. That's the real first moment. The place where most people fold the idea back up and put it in a drawer and go make a different video. You don't put it in the drawer. That's when you understand the difference between curiosity and consequence. You land on the island, and the heat hits you like a wall. Not warm, not uncomfortable, suffocating. The kind of heat that doesn't feel like weather. It feels like pressure, like the air itself has weight, and it's resting directly on your skull. Your brain slows before your body does. You have a crate, a small one, some survival essentials, some water. The water looks like a lot until Haas explains it has to last until the boat is finished. He says it once, flatly, without drama. Then he moves on, and you're left doing the math. Gallons divided by days divided by 5 people in 100-degree heat, and the math keeps coming out wrong no matter how generously you run it. Nobody knows how long the build will take. Nobody knows how to build a boat. You don't say any of this out loud, because saying it out loud turns it into something you have to respond to, and there's no good response yet. You pick a spot for camp and start working immediately because stopping feels like dying. The shelter goes up slowly. Every knot is a negotiation. Every beam is a question you don't have the answer to. You tie things and untie them and tie them differently and wonder if the different way is actually better or just different. Chandler gets hoisted into the air trying to secure a line. He asks to come down. Nobody is sure how to bring him down. He hangs there for a moment that stretches out longer than any moment should. That's when you realize this island doesn't care how many subscribers you have. It doesn't make accommodations for people who are used to things working out. It has its own physics, its own logic, and the only way to operate inside it is to learn its rules fast. Chandler comes down eventually. Everyone pretends that wasn't as bad as it was. You keep building. The sun sets on day 1, and you sit around a fire you barely managed to start. The wood was damp in places, wrong in others. You used materials you probably shouldn't have, but it caught. And now you're sitting in the dark with the jungle making sounds on all sides and the ocean somewhere past the tree line. You ask the group a simple question. Has anyone built a sailboat before? Silence. Not embarrassed silence, just honest silence. The kind that says, no, and we all knew that when we agreed to this, and here we are anyway. Has anyone sailed before? More silence. Haas is the closest thing to an expert in the group. He once kind of built one in a video that partially worked. Partially worked is doing a lot of load bearing in that sentence. You don't dig into it, you just nod. That's your engineer. Tomorrow you begin. You look at the fire. You look at the darkness where the ocean is. 5 miles of open water that doesn't care about partial success. You sleep.
Morning of day 2, and Haas is already outside before anyone opens their eyes. He's building a miniature model in the sand. 2 hulls, cross beams, a mast the size of a pen. His hands are moving with a certainty that none of the rest of you feel yet. thinking about displacement and buoyancy and weight distribution not as theory, but as practical equations with real stakes attached. He holds it up. It's the size of a shoebox. You need something 30 to 40 times larger, something that can hold over 1,000 pounds, something that doesn't just float in calm water, but moves through open ocean when the wind and current say otherwise. You look at the shoebox. He drops it in the water. It floats. It sits there on the surface, stable, the little mast pointing straight up, doing exactly what he calculated it would do. You think, if that logic scales, this works. That's the first moment you believe it might actually be possible. But belief doesn't build a boat. Materials do. And the materials are inside the jungle. Haas calls the group together before anyone takes a step toward the tree line. Fer de lance snake, yellow eyelash liper, wandering banana spider. He names them the way a pilot names weather systems before takeoff, not to frighten, just to inform, just to make sure everyone understands the jungle will not be surrendering its bamboo without a negotiation. The fer de lance is the one he says twice, a viper, fast. No rattle, no warning posture. It's just there, and then it isn't, and then something is very wrong with whoever was in between. You look at the jungle. You look at each other. Then you walk in anyway, because bamboo is light, bamboo is buoyant, and bamboo is your only option. Later, you realize that this challenge will keep doing that, keep presenting you with options where every choice is hard, and staying still is the hardest one of all. The jungle is loud. The heat inside it is worse than the beach, thicker, wetter, less moving. Ants find their way into your shirt within minutes, not a few, columns of them, purposeful, going somewhere important on a schedule you interrupted. They don't sting immediately. They wait. That's worse somehow. A bird erupts out of a tree so close you feel the air displacement of its wings. Your heart does something involuntary and embarrassing. A beehive gets pointed at like a dare. Nobody follows through. Some decisions make themselves. But the bamboo is there. Good bamboo. Tall and thick and dry at the core. You know it's right when you cut into it and hear the crack, the sound of a material that has been building structural integrity for years, waiting in a jungle that didn't know you were coming. You cut it, you carry it, you repeat. The first load breaks a sweat you don't fully recover from for the rest of the day. The third load is pure mechanics. Your brain disengages from the complaint loop and your body just moves. Somewhere between the second and third load, you stop thinking about home. You're just working now, purely working. No performance, no optimizing for how it looks, just the weight of bamboo, the path through the trees, the drop zone on the beach, and back again. That's a feeling you didn't expect. You expected dread. You got something closer to clarity. The ocean washes things onto this beach that ships discarded. Plastic containers, broken crates, rope, things that were once useful and became lost and ended up here. Blue barrels, sealed shut and hollow inside. You find one half buried at the tide line and dig it out. You test it in the water. It bobs perfectly, stable, high floating, the kind of buoyancy that doesn't compress under load. You carry it back to camp. You find another, then a third. Each one is a different kind of relief, not the relief of comfort, the relief of a plan becoming real. Every barrel is evidence that the math actually works. The fourth one is different. The fourth one is necessary. You need it for balance, for the catamaran geometry Haas has been sketching in his head, and the fourth one doesn't show up. The three you have sit in a row, and the gap where the fourth should be is a problem you have to solve before anything moves forward. It might not exist on this beach. It might be underwater. It might be on a different island entirely. But you walk 2 hours in 100 degrees heat along a coastline that cuts into your feet and offers no shade. Because the alternative is never leaving. Day 3 brings construction. Real construction. Not preparation, not planning, not collection. The actual assembly of a thing that is supposed to float and move and hold 5 people above the ocean. Cross beams get lashed together with rope salvaged from the beach. Barrels get fixed into a cradle underneath. A deck starts to form. Chandler takes a break. Not long, just long enough to not fall over. The cameraman, who came to document a survival challenge, gets drafted in to help build the boat. The camera goes down, the tools go up. Nobody comments on this because there's too much work, and the sun doesn't care about job descriptions. The knots are the thing that keeps circling back. Each knot you tie, you know, one loose one, and the whole structure fails in open water. Not fails dramatically, just quietly loosens under wave action until one beam shifts, then another. Then the geometry is wrong, and what was a boat becomes wreckage. You tie it again, tighter. Then you check it. Then you check it again. The float test comes before the sail. You drag the assembled structure to the water's edge, all of you together, because it's heavier than expected, and the sand gives under the weight in the worst places. There's a pause that nobody planned. What if it just sinks? You've spent 3 days cutting bamboo and lashing beams and retrieving barrels and tying knots until your fingers don't open properly. In the next 30 seconds, either that was all leading somewhere or it wasn't. It doesn't sink. The barrels do their job, the bamboo does its job, the rope does its job. The whole structure sits on the surface, bobbing, a little uneven, adjusting to the small waves, but there, holding. You scream. Everyone screams. Until you remember you built this from nothing. That a week ago the materials were in a jungle and the knowledge wasn't in any of your heads. That it floats is not a small statement when you are on an island with no other way home. Then it sounds exactly right. That night, lying in the makeshift shelter, listening to the jungle breathe in the dark, you think about what it used to mean to make a video. Sets built by crews, prizes sourced by producers, logistics handled by people whose entire job is to make sure nothing goes actually wrong. Safety nets everywhere, invisible, but there. And now, 5 people, a floating pile of bamboo, a sail that hasn't been built yet, and an ocean that has no safety net embedded in it anywhere. You don't feel smaller, you feel closer to something, like there's a version of yourself that's been waiting behind the production values and the metrics, something rawer and quieter, and for the first time in a long time, that version got to show up. You're not sure what to call it yet. Nolan finds the 4th barrel. He carries it back across a mile of rocks in heat that is turning the air into something visible. The rocks are uneven and hot through his shoes. There's no path. He makes one. By the time Darius brings it into view of camp, Nolan can't see straight. His fingers are tingling. His vision is going dark at the edges, not gradually, but in pulses, like something flickering. He sits down in the sand and drinks water. Not sips, long swallows, his body accepting it the way a dry thing accepts water, completely, immediately, without hesitation. Nobody makes a video out of that moment. Nobody calls it anything. Later, days later, after you're off the island, you'll understand that this was the moment the group became a team. Not when they agreed to the challenge, not when the boat floated, not when you pushed off from shore. Right then, when one person carried something unbearable back across impossible terrain and sat down and needed water, and the rest of you gave it to him without making it about the video. Right then. With the 4th barrel locked in, the work accelerates. 17 crossbeams, lashed on both sides, a poop deck that someone names as a joke during a moment of delirious exhaustion, and that becomes the boat's actual identity. The sail is Hase's domain.
He has been quietly reading the ocean this whole time, the direction of current at different hours, the way the surface changes when the wind shifts, the relationship between the moon's position and the tide's behavior. He tells you about the window. New moon, extreme tidal exchange. High tide pulling out toward low creates a current running directly toward the target island, a free ride if you hit it exactly right. If you launch at the correct hour, the ocean becomes something it almost never is, cooperative. Miss the window, and no amount of paddling closes the gap. The ocean is not your ally. You have a short, specific agreement with it, and the terms are non-negotiable. The sail is fashioned after ancient Polynesian crab sail designs, a shape these waters have seen before, built by people who crossed open Pacific without motors or GPS, who knew the ocean the way Hasse is learning it now.
Midnight on the final night of construction. Everyone is still working. The fire throws shadows across the frame of the boat. You walk around it in the dark and run your hands along the beams and pull on the knots and tell yourself everything is solid. Nobody is speaking in full sentences anymore. Communication has compressed to pointing, nodding, single-word confirmations. Pass that. Hold this. Check that one. Chandler sits down next to a piece of bamboo and stares at it. He knows what it's for. He knew an hour ago. Right now, the information isn't available. You tie a knot you've tied 20 times already because your hands need something to do while your brain tries to find the gaps. By the time you stop, the boat is finished. Not perfect. There are knots you'd tighten differently, placements you'd adjust, a section of decking that sits slightly higher than it should. You could list the imperfections for an hour. But the imperfections don't change what it is. Finished. You sleep for a few hours with the sound of the ocean nearby, closer than it has ever felt. Morning of the sail. The boat looks different in daylight than it did at midnight. At midnight, it looked large against the camp. In the full Pacific sun, against the actual water, it looks like what it is. 5 miles of open ocean is a long way, and the structure between you and it is bamboo and rope. The island you're sailing toward is a smudge on the horizon, not a landmark, a suggestion, a direction. 5 miles of open water, a crab sail improvised from materials that didn't start as sail materials. 4 handmade oars that will blister your hands within an hour. One person who has been calculating this crossing for days and whose confidence you are choosing to trust because the alternative is not going. You push off. The current grabs you immediately. Not gently, it grabs you the way the ocean grabs things it intends to keep, purposefully, without apology, with the casual strength of something that has been moving this water since before there were people to notice it. But this time, it's pulling in the right direction, and you lean into it. 15 minutes on, a short pause, back in. You watch the shoreline behind you shrink. That's the only way you can tell you're moving. The shore getting smaller rather than the destination getting larger. The island ahead barely seems to move at all. 1 hour in, Chandler looks pale. Not tired pale, the specific pale of someone whose body is running internal negotiations that haven't been announced yet. 2 hours in, Nolan's paddle snaps. The crack is loud across the water. Then Nolan is holding half a paddle, and the boat is immediately less maneuverable, and the ocean doesn't make any accommodations for this. Haas shifts his weight to adjust course and loses part of the rigging overboard. The rope disappears beneath the surface the way small things disappear in the ocean, instantly, completely, as if it was never there.
The boat starts to turn, away from the island, the bow swinging out toward open water. You paddle harder, all four of you, pulling against the rotation. It takes 6 minutes. 6 minutes of burning arms and watching the island neither get closer nor farther while you pour everything into just maintaining position. Then the bow comes back around, slowly, the way the ocean gives things back when it decides, on its schedule, not yours. That's when you understand what the ocean actually is. It isn't dramatic. It isn't a villain. It's just indifferent, the purest form of indifferent, to whether you make it or don't. It was here before you, and it will be doing exactly this long after, and your presence is a detail it hasn't registered. The channel arrives at hour 4. Haas warned you. He used specific language, deadly, pull you sideways, nothing you can do once it takes you. Now you're in it. The current that's been your engine for 4 hours suddenly shifts direction. It's pulling you sideways, toward open water, away from the island in the most consequential direction possible. You're not moving forward, you're moving sideways, toward nothing. Darius hasn't stopped paddling, not once. His arms have stopped being about strength. They're operating on something below strength, some function that exists in the gap between exhaustion and shutdown, a place that very few people ever find because very few situations ever demand you go there. You watch him and feel ashamed of your tired shoulders. You pick the paddle back up.
6 hours in, Jimmy is lying flat on the deck. The sun has been on the tops of his hands so long the skin has changed color. Chandler is somewhere between awake and unconscious. Not sleep, the state past exhaustion where the body stops signaling its distress and just goes quiet. Nolan is shaking, fine tremors in his hands, the kind that's blood sugar and dehydration and hours of physical work under direct equatorial sun. The island is 3.5 miles away. You've been on the water for 6 hours, and the island is 3.5 miles away, the same distance it was 2 hours ago. That's the moment it becomes genuinely unclear, whether this ends with 5 people walking onto a beach or a flare going up over a structure you built and couldn't quite get home on. You look at the flare in the supply bag. You don't reach for it yet. Then the tide shifts again. Jose notices it first, the boat turning toward the island without anyone paddling. He says nothing for a moment, just watches, confirming. The moon is pulling the water. The water is moving the boat, and for the first time in hours, the current is working with you. Nobody celebrates, nothing left to celebrate with, but you pick up your oar. 8 hours in, 2.5 miles, then 1.7, then 1.0. Every tenth gets called out like a countdown, like proof that forward motion is still possible when forward motion felt like it might not be anymore. 0.9. You know what comes after 0.9. 0.8. The island is no longer a smudge. Individual trees now, distinct and real. The specific dark green of tropical canopy, the white of the beach, the line where shore meets water. The island is there, real, reachable. 0.7, half a mile. Then the tide shifts one final time. Jose checks his calculations and looks up. 20 minutes, that's what's left in the window. The water that was carrying you swings around. You feel it before you see it, the current pressing against the bow now instead of pushing from behind. You're half a mile from the island. You paddle so hard your vision whites out at the edges. All of you, broken paddles, sunburned hands, 11 hours of open ocean, everything left in one final consolidated effort. It doesn't matter. The current is stronger than 5 people who have been at sea since this morning. It's not a contest. It's just physics. The water weight, the pull of the moon, the mathematics of the ocean being the ocean, and physics has no interest in making an exception for you. The island gets farther away. Not quickly, just farther. That measured, indifferent, irreversible farther. You fire the flare. The light goes up into the sky above the Pacific, above a bamboo boat built from jungle material and ocean trash, above 5 people who didn't know how to build a boat a week ago and built one anyway and sailed it for 11 hours and came up 20 minutes short. The light arcs and fades. Nobody speaks for a long time. The island sits exactly where it was, unchanged, unaware, asking nothing from this moment. That's when you understand something nobody tells you about effort. Effort doesn't guarantee arrival. You can give everything, every physical resource, every hour, every decision made in the right direction, and the ocean can still shift. The window can still close. The math can still come out against you. Effort doesn't guarantee arrival. It just determines who you are when you don't arrive. You sit on the deck of the boat you spent a week building, sunburned, salt-dried, arms that don't fully close into a fist anymore, the ocean moving under the bamboo, the structure holding, the knots you tied 100 times still holding. You think about the question underneath all of this, the one that was always underneath it. If everything is stripped away, the sets, the budgets, the crew, the safety nets, the production infrastructure that turns consequence into content, what actually remains? 5 people in open water, a structure made with their own hands, hours of refusing to stop when stopping was the reasonable option, the safe option, the option that required the least from everyone involved. That's what remains. And the ocean, completely indifferent, as it has always been, as it will always be, asking the same question it has asked of everything that tries to cross it. How much do you actually want it? You don't answer. You already did.